Welcome everyone, and welcome to our series of how-to sessions, how-to sessions that actually aim to help you shape policy communications for the times we live in. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Anisha, and I'm a consultant here at Cast from Clay. Firstly, thank you very much for joining us today. It's great to see so many of you here. So the first thing I should say is this webinar is currently being recorded, and we will sort of circulate the recording afterwards when the session is done. So for those of you who haven't met us before, we are Cast from Clay. We are a team of creatives that shape and disrupt policy narratives. So we help policy and research organizations figure out what to say, to whom, and how in a way that moves things forward. That brings us onto today's session, which will be led by our lovely Natallia, who is the head of strategy here at Cast from Clay. Natallia is a digital comms expert. She specializes in transforming complex narratives into simple and engaging formats. So before joining Cast from Clay, Natallia worked at the Foreign Office, and she's also a trustee of the Neon Digital Arts Festival. So she'll be drawing on her wealth of experience to talk to you about our session today, which is how to take communication, complex ideas in an ever-changing digital space. Just a few housekeeping rules. Please use the Q&A section for any of your questions, and the chat for discussion and introductions like we did earlier. So now I'm going to hand it over to Natallia, who will take this webinar on. So over to you, and thanks again, everyone.
Thanks so much, Anisha. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Natallia. I'm a head of strategy at Cast from Clay. I'm sorry if my voice sounds a little funny. I've got a cold, but nothing really gets in the way of my commitment to good policy communication. So today I'll be talking to you about how to communicate complex ideas in a changing digital space. Let's see if my presentation is working. It's working. So my presentation is structured the following way. There will be 3 key takeaways. Watch out for yellow. Like there will be slides on yellow. I will briefly explain why you should think about them, and also offer some ideas of how you can think about them. And it is generally quite a broad topic, and I'm thinking whether we should turn this into a potentially training course. For those who don't know, we run Cast from Clay. We do trainings, more long-term trainings. If this might be of interest to you following this webinar, please get in touch, and we might consider doing one with more practical exercises where you can actually apply the knowledge that I'll share today. So I'll try to share as much as I can in the time we've got. I'm a little bit slow today, so it might take me a bit longer to go through all the material, but we should have some time also left for the questions afterwards. Right. So one thing that is obvious about the changes, the technological changes we're all experiencing, and the advancement that we're looking at with AI and so on and so forth, is that policy organizations are struggling to keep up. And to be honest, like who doesn't, right? And no one really understands what is happening. You're not alone. We're all slightly in this observer seat here. It's just that some are trying better than others. And if you look at everything that's going on digitally, from the new ownership of Twitter to Web3 to AI, to how politics is being shaped by the new technologies, you can actually conclude and make a few observations about the new digital. So first of all, what is clear, that it's extremely fast-paced environment. It's rather fast foody in a way, and it changes the way our focus. It changes our focus. It changes the way our attention works online. It's no doubt entertaining. We've all found ourselves scrolling through reels and chuckling funny videos. So this is the essential characteristic of short videos these days. It's educative in a strange sense. I would say that everyone somehow have become an expert in something, and a lot of content that's being produced is to teach people and to share what they know. And it also comes with its own risks, right? It's very often misleading. And I don't know, everyone here works in slightly different policy areas, but one example I can bring in here is that TikTok trends on food are now being heavily criticized by nutritionists, right? And we're only about to see larger cultural effects that this media will have on our society later on. It's automated and it's recycled, and it's quite interesting to see these days that a lot of old recordings and videos popping up with new messages, and we'll come back to that one a bit later. And it's absolutely infinite, right? You can scroll all day if you wanted to. And all in all, it creates this feeling that there is very little space left for complexity. However, I'm not entirely sure that this feeling is true. With so many issues and conflicts, the appetite for complexity is still there, and the appetite for genuine information and research for any, I don't know, it's still there for any thinking person, if you think about it, to understand why these conflicts happen and how to think about them and what one can do about them. And this also includes the vibrant and slightly different Gen Z, right? A lot of big organizations are now targeting and working with Gen Z. So people need and seek access to credible research analysis. And it's just a question of who better occupies the space, right? And I'm afraid to say that these are not research organizations. They are falling behind. So my first advice to you is don't bring old models into new digital. Communication model has changed. A lot of what we knew, a lot of what we practiced, and that includes like our expertise as comms experts, it no longer brings the same results. So we need to change the way we do communications and the way we can get people attentions. It has become significantly more crowded, more noisy, more confusing, and it does require you to allocate your resources differently. So I don't know if you might have came across this old policy comms model that we shared quite a lot of times on our social media. So you do your research, you package it all up in a report, and then you do a bunch of events and social media tweets about it. So this doesn't work anymore. It hasn't been working for a while now. The way we think about it at Custom Clay is at the center should be your story, right? Your narrative should define your communications. And once you've figured how to relate to people on a more human level, it will be much easier for you to engage partners, stakeholders, and also the general public. And the way you produce content has become much more demanding and much more diverse. So how do you get accustomed to these new models? Like, how do you fit in? Advice number one, accept the hard truth about influencing. There is a funny thing about influencing. The more you commit to doing social good, the more likely you are to develop this blind zone and lose the sense of what real world is like. And when you work in the sector for a really long time, and that is very similar to my job, things become automated, right? We presume a lot of things. We don't always question how others see them. And we use the same language that's familiar for us, but no one else can understand. That is why I suggest that the sector should go through what Kant called enlightenment, the ability to think for oneself, rely on one's own intellectual capacity in determining what to believe or how to act, or what I call unbubbling. Necessity to recognize that we are in a bubble, and that our judgment is based on opinions and practices that take place within the sector, and whether it's NGO sector, think tanks, or policy sector, it's kind of all the same. So recognizing that the world outside our bubble doesn't always care and doesn't always have time for what we do and what we have to say. They might care about the issue and they might care about the people, but not necessarily about us. And you can, of course, publish very detailed PDF explaining why they should care, but it's probably not the way to convince them, right? There are billions of PDFs out there. Unless you print them, this is the most inaccessible format. So critically questioning whether this is the right way to go with your research should be your first step. So tip number one, dare to be wise. as Khan said, it's not a matter of understanding, it's a matter of courage and ability to say that we're going to do things differently. Next step, simplify. And I'm just going to show you a 10-second video here. Hopefully you will be able to hear the sound as well.
What to say to a woman who wants to undertake a job that's commonly considered to be better suited to a man? Okay, it's not that hard.
This is one of my favorite campaigns of all time. It's done by a New Zealand NGO about gender inequality and bias at workplace. And they didn't go full data about the gender pay gap or, you know, the showing the numbers about a number of women in senior positions. They made you feel the bias, and they showed that it's not that difficult to change the status quo. And if you're interested to Google that, they have like a whole selection of little videos like that. Basically make a really good point. Oops, sorry.
What to say?
So, we work with a lot of policy and research organizations where everything you do, everything you produce is really important and really complex. But I'm a strong believer that anything can be simplified and told in a normal and simple language. You're very welcome to challenge me on this. I'm going to share the personal story. I'm quite interested in philosophy and physics, which comes with a lot of complex ideas. And I follow a lot of social media accounts that explain those theories. So if they manage to explain what they do, these complicated, you know, metaphysics and very abstract ideas you can't even touch or feel, I don't believe the social issues we are working with are more difficult than that. So mainly because what you've got is a story, right? The story, you work for people, your work is about people, and your work is also about yourself. Like, why are you doing it? And this is really heavily missing in the sector, the storytelling that comes with your research. So try telling it and try having a conversation. So if something interesting happens, so we normally usually, you know, talk in normal language to each other. But every time we start writing content for social media, or every time we're trying to explain what we do, we slip into this jargon and cliche words that mean anything and nothing at the same time. So try staying away from them and just be normal, really. Talk to people as you talk to your friends and family. Try using metaphors, use humor, and you can apply a distillation technique. You can start with writing everything you have to say and then narrowing it down to 10 words, 5 words, and 3 words, just to first figure out what you're actually trying to say. And then you can always add stuff back in and add it as much as you can and add it until you get there. And adjusting to new digital, you're not going to have all the answers straight away, but what you can do is tunnel this uncertainty into creativity. No matter how scary or weird TikTok is or new channels are, they're just a comms tool. And if you actually deconstruct the attraction behind the messages, how they're structured, how they work, you can find a way to use them. So these characteristics that we defined of digital media at the very beginning, they can actually be reversed engineered, right? If the media is fast, it just means that you have to be fast. If it's entertaining, that you need to find a way to be entertaining with your content, you can also be educative, right? You have contents to teach people, to educate people about your knowledge and your expertise, right? Recycle, try to reuse the materials that are already out there for you. And in terms of infinite, just post more, just be more proactive. Don't prepare one tweet a day and just wait for it to go viral. So in preparation to this webinar, I've engineered my Instagram. So I mostly now get social and political content. It did take a bit of time for me to get there, and I still sleep to pandas from time to time, but it's a really interesting experience, and you can do the same, because it shows you the variety of content you can produce, right? From doing really short and snappy reporting at COP to giving platform to young people and researchers and communities or good speakers within your organization, to actually reusing available content. And I thought that you can actually hold politicians to account by what has been said and what has been promised. if you're doing a more political focused campaign. So there is a lot of space for you to experiment, have a bit of fun with it, and just take your research and break it down in a small increments and small pieces of content. And the idea behind it that you can use is to lead people and to bring their attention to your long form. Having said that, your long form has to become significantly more attractive than just a PDF. A surprising amount of organizations use YouTube purely as an archive, while YouTube is the second largest search engine. Like 2 billion people use YouTube on a daily basis. And it's really a shame to miss out on such opportunities. You can produce really engaging content, long form content that people will listen till the end. And you just need to invest a bit of time in thinking into it. So this part sums up the new model part. So I'm just going to move into the next device, which is going to be a yellow slide. Be your own media, right? Policy organizations often work really hard to get mentioned in the media and raise their agenda with a news outlet, which is a justified endeavor, and it should definitely be part of your comms strategy. However, media is still very much governed by what sells, right? And a lot of topics and a lot of stories in our industry, they're not necessarily clickable or newsworthy or easy to sell. This doesn't mean that you should give up. Absolutely the opposite. You should try and medialize your own content. Make it more accessible, more engaging, gain your own followers, and make journalists part of them. We don't really have time to go into like a full topic of how media forms opinions, but I would encourage you to consider this quote by Zizek from his book, Pandemic, COVID-19 Shakes the World, where he says, one interesting question raised by coronavirus pandemic, even for a non-expert in statistics like me, is where does data end and ideology begin? And I thought this was a really interesting question for many policy organizations, because it asks us to recognize existing beliefs and also your role in reshaping these beliefs, in reconstructing these frames. Instead of just coming up with your message, you need to realize how this message is going to reverberate, if at all it will reverberate with existing ideologies in place. And this is a significantly bigger task, right, than just publishing one report or one news article. It requires you to rethink your digital strategy, right? How you publish your research, most importantly, why you publish your research, and how you also expect people to engage with it. This is one of the websites we've launched a couple of months ago. We worked with Inkstick on their brand and their regional website, and we just did a refresh. And when I talk about medialization of policy content, they are a really great example. So this is how they describe themselves. I'm just going to jump to the bottom of this paragraph, where they say, and we can't help feeling like most of today's national security and foreign policy outlets are written by and for the same set of voices in the same boring tone. Inkstick is a foreign policy for the rest of us. And they're indeed creating content about really complex issues. If you want to go and browse on their website after this webinar, it's very accessible, very relatable in a very human way. So my advice number 5, drive change, not papers. And start with your website, rethink your content. We've already kind of covered some of it. Become more accessible, easy to find, easy to navigate, and most importantly, easy to understand. Like, think about your website as a platform, not a repository or archive. So you need to curate your content and you need to help people find it. And also make sure that your design and UX is user-friendly so people actually enjoy using your website. Sorry. Invite different people to write for you. This is what Inkstick does. They have a lot of journalists writing for them with a lot of different background, with a lot of different thinking to offer about the topics that they're covering. So you can do the same with your research. Invite different people to cover what you have produced, and make sure you focus on the right thing. A lot of work in policy comms is geared toward this one big reveal, like one big publication, one event, one high-profile visit, You know, COP28 is a good example of it. And everything else somehow becomes like just miscellaneous communications. So my advice is try to reverse this and make sure that you're also up to date with what's going on around you. So be present, really. Like, don't stall on refining and rewriting your messages when the situation is gaining attention now. You should actually already know what your values are and what you stand for. Third takeaway, I'm just going to check in on time. Okay, we're almost there. This is the third takeaway. Search for an easy solution. We're going to actually take a little break in here with Volley. So imagine internet, right? The endless universe of content, material, initiatives, websites, algorithms, apps, services, products, whatever you can think of. There is already so much out there that you can use without needing to reinvent the wheel. So I would like to challenge you. Next time you have an idea, don't launch another campaign or another website or another Twitter profile. Think about what is already out there and who's already out there who can help you achieve what you're trying to achieve in a shorter period of time. So take this shortcut. And to do so, you need to work together. You need to work with partners. There is a very strange competition going on in our sector, and that's why nothing substantially is changing in many crucial areas. And we have a lot of people talking about the same thing in different voices, but then somehow not coming together. This is another custom play modified graphic, previously of 4 and now of 5. Of 5 stages of digital maturity, right? It has a lot of different criteria, and I think maybe someone from our team will share it in the webinar chat. But basically, it's about how you evaluate your progress in digital comms. And I added the last one, the cluster one, of working together. So making sure that you have a plan how your messages will be shared and endorsed by other partners. You might have also noticed that in yellow was in our comms model, partner engagement at the very top, even before you start producing other content and going out with your campaign, thinking about who is there, who can reinforce your message and make it sound louder. And this is just one way to think about it. So you can place yourself in bigger context. Think who's already there, who's doing what you're doing. Right? You probably know that by now. Right? You're either peers or competitors. Then make a list of people who is doing what you do, but they might have a different, who are thinking that what you do, but they might have a different profession. So they're doing something different, yet they are on the same page, right? NGOs, international organizations, local governments, and so on and so forth. And then go broader, like look for people who do a totally different thing, but their work can contribute to your cause. And you can also find the right incentive to engage with them. So for example, private companies, corporates, media, you've seen how many people supported Ukraine, and we work with a couple of NGOs who are now actually trying to leverage this initiative and see what corporates have to offer. More and more companies now have corporate social responsibilities, policies, and a genuine interest in changing the environment and contributing to social benefit. So there is a lot of opportunities there that you can leverage to help strengthen your message and also achieve a better impact. And this is all I've got for you today. 3 takeaways and a couple of ideas of how to implement them. And let us know if you have any questions. We're quite good on time. Anisha, if you can.
Yeah, thank you very much, Natallia, for all those helpful tips and insights. We can now sort of move on to the questions that we do have a couple of questions. I just want to remind everybody that they can go ahead and type any of the questions that they want in the Q&A box. But I'm happy to sort of start sharing some of the questions that people have already put forth across to you, Natallia. So the first one that I have is, apologies if I do butcher your name, but Swanji, The question that was posed was, how do you push back against policy fellows who say they don't know what the story is since they haven't written the report or done the research as yet?
One thing that stood out to me in the question is the pushback part. And I think this is something, there's obviously in our sector the competition between comms people and research people, and I don't think it helps anyone. So maybe the first thing that I would address is actually trying to work together instead of necessarily reinforcing or thinking about it as a competition. So I worked with quite a lot of different research organizations, and even in the Foreign Office. I worked with British Antarctic Survey once, with heavily, they are researchers, but they've been the best storytellers ever. And if you show the right curiosity about the job that they do, and ask the right questions and explain what you do and why you're doing it, they are usually been very open and very interested to take part and help you. So I think it may be, the question is not necessarily pushing back or arguing against it, it's just creating this journey, comms journey together, and starting it a bit earlier. It has been, I know for many people and for me in Foreign Office, a challenge of introducing comms people to meetings about before the research commits or before any project starts. It takes a bit of time to get there, but try to build it allies where people come to you. We did get there in the end, where a few people would come to you like, oh, we're planning this project. Do you think there is an opportunity for good comms in it? And that kind of sets a different ground for communication. I might actually move on to answering your question. If you actually need to push back, what we do also is trainings for researchers and comms people, where this is an opportunity for you, like workshops, an opportunity for you to understand what story is, how your brand fits into it, and how can everyone become part of this story. So you might want to do like internal exercises like that.
Yeah.
I'm answering the question. I'm still digesting it, but
but I think that sort of answers it to what Swansji was saying as well. But in sort of with respect to the question that was asked, there was Andrea who was also wanting to get a bit more insight into the first question that you responded to, which is, how do you even convince them to start thinking of what their story is in the first place? So policy folk tend to overcomplicate things and be too wordy, even if you just keep asking them, but what's the story? So what gives you that aha moment is the question by Andrea.
What is the aha moment? It's a very similar question, so I'm just trying how would I rephrase it? It sounds quite similar to okay. There are a few things. You get people excited, and there are different ways you can get people excited about their own research. So we just did a campaign on, oh my God, what was the campaign about? It was about livestock and agriculture, investment in agriculture in Africa. And this
Solutions with legs.
Yes, solutions with legs. And we've been playing around with different concepts and ideas. And if you just, I think the issue is how you also communicate internally and how you bring people on the journey. So what I found from our work, if you just come out with people with an idea, with just one tagline or one name, it's really easy to criticize. There is not enough nuance. So you have to sometimes go a little bit further to show how your campaign or how your set of comms will actually tell a bigger story and show that there is the space of nuance. It's just you channel it. You need to, we have, Custom Clay has developed this communications funnel a while back that kind of shows you how you lead the audience. So if you take the same journey with the people you're working with, saying like, okay, we might not be starting with a 100-page PDF, But the idea that we will lead people to this 100-page PDF. We'll start with one short message, with one controversial message, with one curious question that brings their attention, and then we'll do these interesting graphics. We do this storytelling with the communities and people who work, and people who, you know, for example, as we did with farmers, people who are directly affected by lack of investment. And that way we will lead policymakers and decision makers toward the final report. So show the journey that you are taking on as comms people, and try to kind of get people excited about the opportunity. Don't get into negatives too quickly, because it's quite easy to criticize each other's works. It's much harder to get everyone excited that you're trying to achieve the same thing.
Sort of a question that I wanted to sort of add to that as well is that, Natallia, we work with quite a lot of clients who delve into a lot of technical work and a lot of complex ideas. So I kind of wanted to know if, I mean, you already gave a really good example at right now, but if you had like another example of something you could share where you had to sort of simplify sort of the client's communication strategy, if you had an example of that.
I mean, this is something we do on a daily basis. Like, you constantly have to simplify. And I think that it's going back to the question of what you want to achieve. It's being very clear about the final outcome. So if the final outcomes to gain their attention and to bring people, to make people think about the issue, you have to be really creative and you have to be really bold. And also what helps is doing testing. Go outside your immediate circles, speak to people who are audiences, who are your partners, who are your followers, and show them different variations of the same communication. Show them how they react to numbers versus how they react to human message. And that will provide you with the actual proof that you can then use internally to show that the more human messages reverberate better. So this is something we often do, of trying to see how different messages work. I'm thinking of other examples, Anisha, I can use. Again, data, going back to Zizek's quote, data can be used in any way you want it. Like, any number can be twisted and positioned in the way that to bring up certain ideology with that behind it, right? And data on its own is not as effective as the sector thinks. While human messages, the real people sharing their real stories, it's quite hard emotionally to get away from it. You can hide behind the data. I wrote an article a while back when the war in Ukraine started, about how when you talk about the war in numbers, you know, how many people killed, how many tanks used, how many, I don't know, mines disarmed, and so on and so forth. It's quite easy to distance yourself from it. It's quite easy to say, like, think about it in numbers, not think about it as a real human beings affected by the conflict. When you start hearing the actual stories of people on the ground, you will never, like, I can't forget them. Like, I can forget the numbers, but I can't forget the actual stories that people shared. So there is a real argument of what is more effective and impactful.
Thanks for that. So we do have one last question, and that's from Nick. And what he's saying is that a lot of the approaches that we described were sort of medializing our content and its long form video content, so on and so forth. As much as that sounds great and fantastic, it's also potentially quite expensive. So he wants to know if you have any tips on how to do this quite well on a budget.
That's a very good question. Good quality content is expensive, yes. If you're especially working and outsourcing some of it, the easiest solution is to try and upskill the resources and people you've got within the team. So do the necessary trainings, do the necessary exercises so that you can produce most of it yourself. So maybe you just need to invest upfront, and then kind of medialize it. Also, it's a good question of what do you mean by medializing the content? Yes, having a YouTube channel with millions of subscribers does require you high quality production and like resources to be able to script write and kind of plan for it and invest into it, for sure. Shorter articles online don't require that. So it's a question of like, what is medialization for you? Again, review your resources and work from the potential that you've got within the team and try to reallocate it where it makes more impact. It's a little hard for me to give an advice of how you can actually cut costs without knowing the full situation, I'm afraid.
Yeah, that sounds good. So I just kind of wanted to also sort of add that if anybody else has any sort of last minute questions that they want to add in, please go ahead. But I can wait for about a couple of seconds. But if there aren't any, I think we've sort of gone through most of the questions that people have had. And I think Natallia has also quite answered them, hopefully to your satisfaction as well. So I'd just like to let you know that we've kind of approached sort of our time on the session. But
if anyone, sorry,
yeah.
Anisha, if anyone has any questions after it, or if I didn't answer it in the detail, please feel free to email me. I'll be happy to consider them a bit quieter, with also without a cold that I currently have. So please feel free to get in touch.
Yeah, so if you also enjoyed the webinar, please do share your thoughts as well. You can find us on Twitter and on LinkedIn under Cast from Clay. So before I sort of wrap up, I just kind of wanted to bring our training course, which is called Aim for Impact. And the new cohort starts in January and it goes on till February. So basically, Aim for Impact is designed for policy communications and research professionals. And it really focuses on different key components like defining your intended impact and articulating how your actions will bring about change, creating a plan to achieve your desired impact, and outlining a framework for measuring it as well. So if you're interested, please reach out to enroll. So with that, I'd just like to thank Natallia and everybody else who joined the webinar, and hopefully we get a chance to see you all soon.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Anisha, for hosting.
No worries. Thanks, everyone.
See you soon.